Did you or your children go to summer camp? If you did, do you remember the songs? For me, my childhood soundtrack of classic summer camp songs is filled with little ditties like, I said a boom-chicka boom, and Sippin Cider through a straw, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Throw in a Zum Gali Gali and a Shalom Rav or two, and it always made me smile that my kids are singing those same summer songs. A joyful summer soundtrack filled with ruach, spirit, and camp legacy. Last week, I visited our Temple Emanuel kids at Camp Ramah and found them singing a very different tune. After lunch, they gathered in the middle of the dining hall, swaying together in large circles, serious and spiritually. Mournfully, they belted out a prayer for the hostages, Acheinu, which we just prayed together moments ago. The words, as for our brethren, the whole house of Israel who are in trouble or captivity, may the Almighty have mercy upon them and bring them from trouble to abundance, from darkness to light, from subjugation to redemption, now, speedily, and soon. My heart broke, as all our hearts break, both so proud, so moved, and yet so broken that Acheinu is this summer's camp soundtrack. That our world, that the world that these kids inhabit is one where hostages have been in Gaza now for 295 days. It was with this echo of the campers' plaintive prayers that I went this week to Washington, D.C., at the generous invitation of our Congressman Jake Auchincloss to hear Prime Minister Netanyahu's address. I don't need to tell you the hopes and the fears and the politics that surrounded this moment, especially taking place as it did in the midst of our own historic moment here in the United States. Now, I've been to the House a few times over the years. Never have I seen, not just there, but anywhere, so much security. With the surrounding streets cordoned off and entry strictly screened, in the halls on the way to the congressional offices, you could hear a pin drop. Together with our members, Mark and Lauren Rubin, we were warmly welcomed by Congressman Auchincloss, who showed up strongly for the premise that the Israel-America relationship is too important not to be in that chamber. I won't take your time this morning dissecting Netanyahu's speech itself. You all have access to the same articles and news profiles that I do and have, I'm sure, come to your own informed opinions. But I do want to share something that I noticed on the ground that felt very different than the reporting that I had seen then or since. So, first of all, if you saw the media reports, you would think that our nation's capital was besieged by a massive horde of protesters. The megaphone given to the full start to finish coverage of the vitriolic hatred that at times was spewed from the stage against Israel, and reports of the thousands gathered made it seem very large and very scary. Whereas when I walked by the protesters themselves, I was surprised by how small, given the national nature of this moment that their numbers seemed. Later news reported that there were about 2,000 of them. By contrast, the DC March for Israel in November, which I and many of you and many of our Temple Emanuel members attended, was also reported as thousands and is now recorded as having had 290,000 people standing in solidarity with Israel post-October 7th. When you contrast that in person, I couldn't help but feel that it was not just political theater when Netanyahu referred to the not many protesters outside. While the megaphone and constantly amplifying media attention they have is exceedingly dangerous, and even one violent protester is one too many, I found some comfort in seeing with my own eyes the loud voices of hate far outweighed by so many of our lawmakers in the chamber. With the sheer abundance of standing ovations, it was like Yom Kippur on 3 times speed there. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Even the terrifying violence and anti-American flag-burning vandalism and graffiti at Union Station was quickly and publicly condemned by politicians on every side of the American political aisle. Now, this may not do it for you, but for me, I found some renewed strength from that clear communication by our congressmen and so many others that we are not alone. Secondly, I was struck by the preciousness and the precariousness of our great American home. I couldn't help but be taken in by the house's historic architecture and art depicting the cost of freedom. That same cost pertains to every one of us today. In the hollowed staircase leading up to the gallery, I imagined our ancestors who are highlighted in this week's Torah portion, the daughters of Zelophehad, who have always been a particular favorite of mine, having named my own daughter Noah after one of them. They are not satisfied to be turned away from participating in their nation's destiny. They stand up for their place. As Jews in America today, we must walk in their footsteps. A representative democracy requires participation, whether you lean left or right, whether with your vote or with your advocacy. Do something in this season to participate in the great project that is our nation, a nation which even in today's torn age remains one of the 2 most robust centers of Jewish life this world has ever seen, and can continue with your heart and hands to be a beacon of hope for our world. Finally, while the news reports mostly centered around partisan politics, I was deeply moved by the tapestry of political and personal complexity, both in the floor and on the gallery. The seats were all assigned, and phones were prohibited. So the obvious thing to do as we wait was to talk with our neighbors. I learned that on one side of me sat a fervent, vocal Republican. On the other side, an outspoken liberal Democrat. Directly across the room, released hostage Noah Argamani, and right behind me, Liat Corinne Unger, cousin of the 21-year-old Omer Shem Tov, currently in captivity, who stood stoically through the prime minister's words and was later removed for bearing a t-shirt that read, "Seal the deal now," a plea to bring all the hostages home. As Prime Minister Netanyahu called attention to the soldiers he brought with him, who served so bravely, represented the diversity of Israel, the chamber erupted with applause. But their eyes conveyed the heavy cost that they had borne. While charismatic calls for victory may make fantastic speech material, the story told by their poignant presence and the delegation of hostage families who stood outside that chamber was much more complex. I walked away from the experience with a deep sense of humility. None of this is easy. And so, leaving the capital area, I took home a profound sense that we must, in the words of our old prayer for the country, ask for the blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, that God may teach them insights from the Torah, so that peace and security, happiness and prosperity may forever abide in our midst, so that the hostages will be brought home, so that there will never be another summer when Acheinu needs to be our camp kids' anthem. But instead, they and we will lock arms and sing together Shalom Rav again. May this be God's will. We rise.